By the year 630 CE, the political, religious, and social landscape of the Arabian Peninsula had changed more dramatically than ever before. The Muslims of Medina, once an outnumbered and besieged community, had risen to become a powerful coalition uniting tribes across the desert. Under the leadership of Muhammad, they had not only survived years of exile and warfare, but had forged an increasingly cohesive society built on shared faith, discipline, and expanding alliances. Central to this transformation was the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, signed 2 years earlier between Muhammad and the Quraysh of Mecca, a treaty once viewed by many as a humiliating compromise. But in truth, it was a masterstroke. That peace accord, forged with caution and clarity, gave the Muslims a critical window. In those 2 years of reduced hostilities, Islam spread more rapidly than ever. It gained traction in places once considered unreachable. Tribal leaders once hesitant now pledged loyalty. The balance of power had shifted, and the Quraysh knew it. But the end of that fragile peace came swiftly. A tribal conflict ignited the flames. The Banu Bakr, an ally of the Quraysh, launched an attack on the Banu Quzaylah, who had placed themselves under the protection of the Muslims. The attack was not just a breach of tribal trust. It was a direct violation of the Hudaybiyyah agreement. With lives lost and the sanctity of the treaty broken, Muhammad now had not only moral authority, but a political mandate to respond. He saw a moment not just to retaliate, but to unify. Unlike past campaigns that called for defense, this one was initiated with a new vision: the peaceful submission of Mecca, the heart of opposition to Islam, and Muhammad's own birthplace. With strategic precision, Muhammad began preparations. Messages were sent in secrecy across Arabia, rallying Muslim allies to gather under one banner. The response was historic. Tribal delegations poured in from all corners of the region, some returning old favors, others recognizing the momentum of faith and power. From Medina to the distant oases, Muslims assembled, until the army numbered 10,000 strong, an unprecedented show of unity and purpose in the Arabian desert. The march from Medina was swift but quiet. The destination, though obvious to some, remained publicly unspoken. Secrecy was critical. Muhammad wanted no resistance, no panic, and above all, no unnecessary bloodshed. He aimed to take Mecca without battle. As the massive force approached the city's outskirts, they camped at a place called Mar Az-Zaran. There, Muhammad employed a brilliant psychological tactic. He ordered thousands of campfires to be lit on the hills, casting an overwhelming glow across the landscape. To those inside Mecca, it seemed as though an army the size of an empire had arrived at their doorstep. Inside Mecca, panic set in. The Quraysh, long divided by internal politics and economic interests, now found themselves united by fear. Abu Sufyan, the longtime chief of the Quraysh and a staunch opponent of Muhammad, realized resistance would be suicidal. He set out with a small party to find Muhammad's camp, hoping to negotiate. What followed was a tense yet pivotal encounter. Abu Sufyan was brought before Muhammad, and after witnessing the strength, discipline, and confidence of the Muslim ranks, he accepted Islam. In a magnanimous gesture, Muhammad not only accepted his declaration, but granted him safety and extended protection to anyone who sought refuge in his home or stayed in their own. As dawn broke, the Muslim army entered Mecca. Divided into units, they marched through different quarters of the city with strict instructions: no harm to civilians, no looting, and no unnecessary aggression. The Quraysh, seeing the order and discipline of the advancing Muslims, offered no organized resistance. There were a few minor clashes on the city's fringes, but they were quickly subdued. What many had feared would be a day of vengeance became instead a display of restraint, purpose, and dignity. Muhammad entered the city on camelback, not with sword drawn, but with head bowed in humility. This was not the triumph of a warlord, but the return of a prophet to the city of his origins. He made his way to the Kaaba, the sacred sanctuary built by Abraham and Ishmael, now filled with over 360 idols, symbols of the paganism that Islam had sought to reform. With deliberate reverence, Muhammad entered the Kaaba, circumambulated it, and began to remove the idols one by one. As he did, he recited,
"Truth has come, and falsehood has perished. Indeed, falsehood is bound to perish."
The act was more than religious symbolism. It was a statement to the entire Arabian world. Mecca, the spiritual and cultural center of Arabia, had turned a new page. The Kaaba, once filled with idols and superstition, was now restored to its original purpose, the worship of the one God. Soon after, Muhammad gathered the people of Mecca in front of the Kaaba. Many of them had been his enemies. Some had plotted his assassination. Others had tortured and killed his companions. And yet, there they stood, defeated, fearful, and uncertain. The air was thick with expectation. What would he do? Seek retribution? Humiliate them? Instead, he asked,
"What do you think I shall do with you?"
They answered, "You are a noble brother, the son of a noble brother."
And in a moment that would become one of the most extraordinary acts of forgiveness in human history, Muhammad said,
"Go, for you are free."
It was not just words, it was a vision. In a society built on revenge and tribal feuds, this unprecedented act dismantled old expectations. His former enemies were now citizens of a new spiritual order. Many, moved by his mercy and leadership, accepted Islam not out of fear, but from conviction. Mecca had not been razed, it had been redeemed. The ripples of this event traveled quickly. Tribes who had wavered now saw the future clearly. The fall of Mecca was not just a political conquest, it was the spiritual and cultural unification of Arabia. Islam had moved beyond survival and entered a phase of consolidation and expansion. The transformation was underway. Markets, homes, and mosques across Mecca shifted almost overnight, pulsing with a sense of transformation that few had expected. The very air of the city seemed different, lighter, more solemn, and yet filled with a cautious optimism. People who once cursed Muhammad now stood beside him in prayer, not as conquered subjects, but as individuals stirred by the power of grace. Families that had once feared Islamic influence now spoke its verses aloud. In marketplaces, traders set down their goods and bowed in unison beside those they once scorned. In homes, the names of former enemies were now spoken with new respect. Old rivals sat with new believers, all turned toward the Kaaba, unified in direction and devotion. The mosques, now filled with a diversity of tribes and voices, echoed not with tension, but with harmony. Unity was no longer an aspiration whispered among hopeful followers. It had become a tangible, breathing reality. And in Mecca, where for so long division and enmity had reigned, a quiet and lasting peace had finally taken root. In the next episode, we examine the Battle of Hunayn, a fierce conflict that erupted shortly after the conquest of Mecca, testing the resolve, unity, and humility of this newly empowered Muslim force.